Beyond Battle Creek is a place to celebrate all that God is doing here at BattleCreek Church, behind the scenes and right in front of our eyes. My name is Gage Johnson, and I've been given the calling of finding and sharing those amazing things that God is doing in our church. As we honor stories of people knowing God, finding freedom, discovering their purpose, and making a difference, my prayer is that you would rejoice alongside us and find your place in the bigger story of the gospel. This season on Beyond Battle Creek, we're celebrating 20 years of BattleCreek Church. Whether this is your first week or you've been with us the whole 20 years, you're part of our history. This season, you'll hear stories of people who've been part of Battle Creek from the very beginning and some that have been only around for a few years. But throughout each story, you can find the common thread of God unmistakably moving in people's lives across Tulsa. Battle Creek Church is your place to know God, find freedom, discover your purpose, and make a global difference. Let's jump in. All right, y'all. I'm sitting here with Brennan and Miranda Seagraves. You guys have been part of Battle Creek Church for how long?
2007. Whatever
Wow.
that math is.
16 years?
16 years.
16 years. Y'all from Pryor Creek, so I don't know. You're not from Pryor, though.
I
Yeah,
am.
she's
from Pryor.
Yes.
We're not going to trust her math. You went to Deer Creek, though. So
I did.
Yeah, we'll trust your math.
Yeah.
You should be able to, Edmund Boy should be able to fire that off pretty
Easy
quick.
money.
Yeah,
Easy
that's
money.
easy money.
Easy money.
So I wanted to want y'all to join us today and just hear a little bit about your story. If you know Brennan and Miranda, you probably know them for one of two reasons. You know Brennan is probably through FCA. This man is everywhere at every high school campus, every college campus in northeastern Oklahoma, it feels like. Just investing in student athletes. But what's your official title with FCA?
I am the Tulsa area director.
Tulsa area director. So how far out does Tulsa area go?
I think you could call it Coweta. You
Okay.
could call it north to Sand Springs. You could call it maybe to Kellyville.
Okay.
I think you could call it Collinsville if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Catoosa.
Okay.
Just make a big circle.
Okay.
Inola, probably.
Yeah, that's out there.
There you go.
That's a pretty big area.
Yeah.
What's your favorite high school to visit? I'm put you on
That's
the
a
spot.
setup. I don't think that I can.
There's one right answer, and it's the U. I know you love to go there.
Yeah, I do love the U. I'll be honest. If we're going to be honest, like the Union was not one of my favorite places to be.
Okay.
When I first started with FCA, because coming out of Battle Creek, Broken Arrow was probably the easiest door to walk through, being at
Yeah.
Battle Creek at the Broken Arrow campus. But when I transitioned to FCA, all of those schools became my responsibility. But they assumed I was the Broken Arrow guy, and so I'm still trying to break out of some of that. But that's fine.
Yeah.
I realize that if coaches give me a hard time because of it now, it's because they like me or
Yeah.
because I've done something right, not because I've done something wrong.
Yeah. The phrase when I was in high school is they just give us a hard time because they wish they were us. You know.
Yeah.
That's what they want.
Yeah. And I'd never heard this until I started hanging around with other Union people that graduated.
Yeah.
They call Broken Arrow a different name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a little too vulgar for the
No. It's I just don't love to say it because my kids graduated from there.
Okay, I won't make you say it. And if you know Miranda, it's probably because she has talked to you about foster care at some point, or left a meal on your doorstep, or something like that,
Or watched your kid.
or watched your kid
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. My child is at your house right now as we
Yes.
speak. Just being taken care
Hanging
of
out.
and having the time of his life, falling asleep while playing.
Yes.
I was telling my sister this morning that he only does that at your house. He will play until he is dog tired and then fall
can't go
asleep at your
anymore.
house. He's never done that for Karis and I. Like,
Yep. And he does
never.
it on the daily.
That's
We
awesome.
just got a great video yesterday.
Yeah, kids motor never stops running. It's awesome. So, man, I wanted to have y'all come on the podcast today and talk about foster care because our church just has this culture of foster care, right? Where any given Sunday you could be sitting at any of our 6 campuses, and more likely than not, you're going to be sitting next to someone who has been a foster parent, is currently a foster parent, or is involved in the foster care system in some way. And for a lot of people, they can trace that back to the Seagraves. Every time I talk to y'all, they're like, no, I don't know if that's true. And like, I swear every single story that I hear about, we got involved in fostering, it was like, y'all's name comes up somehow. There's even a couple in my community group right now that are starting out on this foster care deal, and they reached out to you guys because they're like, oh, if you foster in Oklahoma, you got to talk to Brennan and Miranda. because they're going to be the ones to give you all the advice you need. But it hasn't always been that way, right? You guys haven't always been involved. What did that look like for you guys to get involved with foster care? Were you already at BattleCreek Church? Were you like what did that look like to get started?
Yeah, I think as we look back on where that started and how it began, was thinking through tons of different things happening all at the same time, like a culmination of a bunch of different things happening to make it kind of clear to us that was something that we were supposed to be going towards. I was serving with BattleCreek bivocationally as a youth pastor in 2007 to 2009, but I was also working at the bus plant. And so I'm working 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, building 70 school buses a day, and they allowed us to listen to headphones. And so I've listened to messages and sermons and podcasts and bought radio network and anything I could get my hands on. And I just started hearing this theme of foster care and adoption and the fatherless and the orphans and what's our response and how should that look? And then I think kind of at the same time, we had a home that was perfect for our 4 people, our 2 children and us. And we had this oversized laundry room for some reason. It didn't make any sense, but it was there and it was readily available.
Yeah.
And we had a couple different instances where there was a guy in our church who his wife cheated on him and he didn't have anywhere else to go. And so we opened that room to him and just said, hey, man, if you could use it, use it. And he lived there for a couple months till he got on his feet and figured out what he was going to do. And then I'd say right after that, my father needed a place to stay. And so we opened that room up to him and put a TV in there and made it somebody's little small house. And
so your first 2 foster kids were grown men.
Where they were grown men. They were grown men.
Grown men.
Love that.
But I think that set us up for what happened right after that, which was a student in our student ministry. He got into an argument with his parents, and they were divorced, and one lived away from Pryor, and one lived in Pryor, and he had the option to go move in with his mother away from Pryor and not graduate from Pryor, or he could find something else to do. And so he came and lived with us, and we were his guardians for 3 months until he graduated. And I think it was at that moment where we were doing adopted. I was listening to messages. We were continuing to open our home. And it was a moment where we said, what's our place in all of this? How does this transcend beyond just opening up a little small room for some people that may be in need to what's our response to the fatherless? What's our response to orphans? What's our response to this orphan care and foster care situation that we know is a huge issue? What's our place in that?
Right.
And also during that time, there were several families in the church adopting. And so, just watching people do that over and over internationally, mostly. And for us, that was interesting. But at the same time, we didn't have $40,000 per kid. And so that was kind of like, well, where do we go from here? And then kind of stumbling upon domestic adoption with the waiting child, all of that stuff on the TV all the time. And so, there's kids here, but how do you get into that?
For sure. I want to unpack something that you kind of skated over, and that was the adopted thing. And so I think if you've been around our church for a while, that probably rings a bell. But if you haven't been around for a while, that may be the first time you've heard us talk about this thing that we call Adopt Ed. So what was that ministry? Is that ministry? And what impact did that have on you guys?
Yeah, when we first heard of it, it was basically an option or an opportunity for the church to be the church to people who needed it the most while they were walking through foster care or adoption. It was basically it felt to me like it was a support system around the issue of foster care and adoption. And I think some of the things that they wanted to do were help families that had just got a new placement in foster care figure out what that was looking like. So maybe a gift card to Target to go pick up some things that you didn't know you needed until a child came on your doorstep with a bag of clothes, and that's it. The other thing I think that it did is it pointed out and it helped give biblical clarity to why we should be involved in adoption or foster care, and why this should mean anything to us as believers who follow the Lord. And I think that those were the 2 biggest things I took away from that. I think at one point it was also an opportunity for a low or no interest loan on international adoption. And I know that during all that process, Alex and Meredith were walking through what it looked like
Yeah.
to adopt from, I think, Argentina.
Guatemala. I think.
Guatemala.
Yeah.
And then they closed it.
And then knowing that closed, and
But it
as
started
I've-
as a sermon series, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually started as a sermon
Wow.
series.
Which is crazy to think back right in this moment about the fact that they had their hearts set and prayed and felt like God spoke to them.
Yeah.
And then to have that completely taken from them. Not very many people understand that club of people. It's a very small club of people who lose a child or pray for a child and it doesn't work out the way you want. And so we didn't understand that till we've lost many, many children through good situations and negative situations.
Yeah. So at that point, you guys are kind of saying, okay, this is maybe something that we would love to do. You see, this adopted ministry kind of making the on-ramp a little easier to get into foster care and adoption. What were your next steps? You guys have fostered 2 grown men. You've had a high school kid. And again, we skated over this a little bit, but you were the youth pastor bivocationally at our Pryor Creek campus, which is now gone. R.I.P. Sad.
R.I.P.
Our church learned a lot, I think, about planning that first campus in Pryor, and what it looks like to plan a campus. But you got to get involved in BattleCreek through that campus, and I think that's a really cool aspect of the story. So you're fostering this kid, fostering unofficially, really.
We're just guardians for him. He's
Yeah.
he's a 17-year-old kid who just needs some direction a little bit while he graduates.
Yeah. And at that point, you guys think, okay, we can do this. Like, we can make this happen. Where do you go from there?
So initially, I think our hearts were more directed towards adoption.
Oh, yeah.
Towards adopting a child. We had 2
We had
children
no
of our
idea
own.
what foster care was then.
No,
Sure.
No
we
idea.
really didn't. And so we put our yes on the table, and we signed up to be foster and adoptive parents, which means you go through 27 hours of training, which is way
So fun.
different now than it was
Yeah.
then. So we had to go to a hotel for 4 weekends straight, I think it was, to get all of our training and all of our hours done. And everybody, it felt like around that room were kinship placements, meaning that they had a relationship to the child that they were now fostering and involved with. And so we were kind of coming in with a different vantage point, a different angle.
Yeah. What was some of
They
the
seemed
attitude
very
for
negative.
these people? Yeah.
Like, I have to be here. I have to do this.
That's tough.
My family needs me to do this.
But I
kind
think
of
it
thing.
did. I think some of that prepared us for the unknown things that we had zero clue that were involved in any of this ministry or any of this calling.
Yeah. Like what?
I think some of the heartbreak that you'll walk through, some of the tough conversations that you'll have, but then so much of the inclusion of other people, knowing that you can't do this on your own, that you have to have a team, you have to have a church, you have to have a group of people that understand, but then also support.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it was at that point, Miranda, right? You started going to the Laura Dester shelter.
Yes.
With y'all's community group, right?
Yeah, we were serving there. Like, one Sunday a month, our community group would go and just play with kids. We would take, like, popsicles and bubbles and all kinds of things, and they would play with, all the grade school kids and stuff. And I would always sneak away to they called it the baby cottage, but which obviously wasn't there for very long, but it was just full of tiny babies just sitting in a bed.
Yeah.
And there was one, like, house mom in there trying to take care of all these kids. And, like, I know how that feels,
Yeah.
and they want to be held. And so I would just go in there and rock babies. And then I started going, not on Sundays, just on my own time, just going and holding babies.
Okay.
So, and then one time I went, and there was this tiny little baby. I called her the little burrito because she was like 4 pounds, 4 days old, just wrapped up in a blanket. And I would just sit and hold her. And one day I told the house mom, hey, I think I'm going to take her home. And she said, well, you can't do that. And I said, well, she's here. Like, she doesn't have a family. Like, I can adopt her. And she's like, but she's not available for adoption, which I did not understand what she meant.
Yeah.
And she's like, she's looking for a foster home. And I was like, what is that?
Wow.
And so I called our adoption worker, who we had not heard from in over a year.
Yeah. So you guys did the training and then you waited,
Mm-hmm.
sat on your hands for a year.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
And we didn't understand
Why.
We didn't understand how the process worked. We were frustrated.
Yeah.
It was half at God, like half at DHS, not knowing how the whole process worked. But then just walking it out and just continuing to go and do what we knew we were supposed to do, and then coming upon this opportunity at the Lord Esther shelter. I think it was all preparing us for it. I don't think it was anything left uncovered or hidden or anything like that.
Yeah. So you call your worker, and what does she say?
I just told her the situation, and she said, well, you have to be a foster parent to do that. And I was like, well, whatever you have to do.
Yeah,
like
the switch.
Switch it over. Yeah. And she's like, well, I have to do some paperwork. And okay, great. Yeah. Like, it's not hard. Get it done.
Yeah.
You know, and so the next day we brought her home.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. The next day. So that kind of set you guys on this trajectory of how many kids have you fostered? How many kids you had in your home? Can you even count?
48.
Yeah, we've had 48.
48 in how many years?
14.
48 in 14 years.
Is it 14? Something like that.
That's a while. Y'all are getting old, by the way.
In 14 years since we first filled out our paperwork.
Oh, okay, yes.
So 14 years
14
of
total.
actually getting kids
waited.
is like 12 and a half.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to take a barb earlier. You guys just getting old because
we heard you. We just moved on.
You ignored it. Okay,
just moved
fair
on.
enough. Fair enough. I probably deserve that. So man, 48 kids in 14 years. You kind of hinted at this earlier, but fostering is not easy, right? I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and you know, in the time that we have, kind of unpack what that looks like for people that haven't ever fostered before or haven't been a part of this before, but are maybe interested in getting started, like what it looks like.
I think one of the first things to come at this subject with is the understanding that if you call on the name of Jesus, that you serve somewhere in the realm of this ministry.
That's right.
That we're all called to it. It's not optional, and that's not easy to say to everybody, but it is the truth.
Right.
And so finding that place, working through it, serving in a baby room to figure out you don't love babies, or that's not your calling, right? Serving in the student ministry to figure out you don't love middle school kids. Yeah. But finding out what that looks like and finding out where you can get in the parade. Yeah. You don't need to create a new parade. And so I think the main thing is for everybody to realize, hey, I can be a part of this. I get to be a part of this, and I'm called to be a part of this. Yeah. And so what does that look like? Now, for us, it looks a little bit different than I think most people. I think that we just had to commit to say, hey, this is the lane that we're called to and that we're going to walk through, and not knowing even what that means, and not knowing some of the incredible joys, and not knowing some of the incredible heartbreak, or all in between. And so what does that look like, and how do you reconcile that every single day? And I think that that's some of what we're walking through, is figuring that out, and knowing that when you say yes, it doesn't mean that child's yours. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that child's not yours either. Yeah. It means that child is a member of your family for as long as they're going to be with your family. And that if you have biological children, that they're equal to your biological children at that moment. For sure. They're no different in the love that you shared with them, because the love that you're sharing with them is not your love anyways. It's the love that God shed abroad in your heart. Yeah.
And that can be tough too. So Karis and I have fostered before, and honestly, truly because of y'all's influence in our lives, and the model that you've set before us of like, this is what it looks like to foster. It's what it looks like to love your neighbor by fostering, and loving Jesus by fostering. And it's tough because kids walk into your home with very little materially, but a lot of baggage, emotionally, especially, and the traumas that they've endured. Because I mean, even if a kid has never experienced abuse or neglect to a severe extent, just being removed from your home is a trauma, right? Like being removed from your biological parents is traumatic. So, what's it like to have that in your home, to have that amount of trauma come into your household, and how do you deal with that, Miranda? What's it been like for you?
First of all, you have to leave your expectations at the door, because what you think this is going to be like, or this child is going to be like, or the attitude you have towards the bio parents does not matter. Like, the bio parents are still their family, and those kids still want to be with them no matter what has happened to them, because that's their birth family. And so your expectations of, this child should not want to be there, or pity for the child, or anger towards the bio parents or the family or the workers for any reason is not going to serve anyone. Your job is to love on this child and just include them into your family, but also you have to make exceptions for them based on what they've been through. And so you can't always go by what your rules and traditions have always been, like for your bio kids or any other kid in your home, because they all need something different.
Sure.
And especially during the time of the healing process. So you have at least 2 weeks where they kind of get to just heal and, kind of do what they want. And then you kind of got to break down a little bit of the rules and like the traditions and the way that you do things. But at the same time, you also have to be willing to let your traditions go and create new ones.
What do you mean by like what kind of traditions are you letting go of when you say that?
Just like traditions or routines, things like that you're like, this is the way our family does things, because that doesn't serve everyone. And if your family keeps changing, then those things have to change also.
Yeah. Flexibility, in my experience, is like the biggest thing that you learn in the foster care world. Not even just the flexibility of like, having a new child and every child needing something maybe a little different, but just like the midnight calls of like, hey, we've got a child that needs placement. Do you guys have a spot for him
And
or
you're
her?
like, yes, but no.
Yeah.
I mean, that's always yes, but no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough doing that in the middle of the night, but foster care is not something that's convenient ever.
Yeah.
So
It'd be super easy just to have biological kids, and y'all have 2 biological kids that are grown, right? They're both out of the house.
Yep.
They have graduated high school. They're doing well. Y'all could be done. Empty nesters.
I'm not going to say I don't think about that almost every day.
Yeah, but instead you have a house full of kids that you love, but it's a difficult thing that God has called us to, right? And it's not easy.
I think one of the things that I would say encapsulates the entire ministry of foster care is just getting in the messy, getting in the deep with people, and realizing that when you say yes to a child, you also, in my opinion, if you do it the right way, you've also said yes to their family, at least for the time being, and at least in a safe and healthy manner. Conducive to that scenario and that situation.
So you're talking about relationships with biological parents, biological grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings. What's that looked like for you guys over the past 14 years?
A really big family tree.
Yeah.
And some really incredible stories that we can watch. I mean, we could tell you stories and we can show you pictures of the ability for us to involve some of the biological parents in our holidays and in our new traditions, and having them come over and be a part of our family, since they don't have family. Even the biological parents of these kids that we're having, they don't have family, and so they don't have support system. And so you see why this becomes a over and over cycle that you're just caught in, because there's nobody to support them. And so we got to invite 2 separate sets of biological parents to Easter last year. Last year, I believe.
Wow.
It was the fall free-for-all.
It was fall free-for-all last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
At church.
At church.
Yeah.
They came to BattleCreek. We found a way to get them all there. We paid for a hotel room for them to stay the night, and they came to church, and 3 of them gave their lives to the Lord and got baptized. And like, those are the moments that you can't dream of, that God would let you see when you said yes to a child. And so those are super cool. But it's also knowing that's now a responsibility of yours as well, to help steward that and to help disciple that and to help connect those people to church. And so one of them, actually, I called John Hickman and tried to get a family connected to him down there at the church.
And actually, we no longer have their kids, but we still talk to them, and now they're moving again. And so I was actually helping her find a church in the new town just 2 days ago.
Praise the Lord.
So,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think for a lot of people that would feel overwhelming to say like, oh, like not only am I inviting a child in, but I'm inviting a whole family in. How do you manage all of that? You know, when you feel like that's a lot to go onto your plate, right?
I mean, it seems like a lot, but in the moment or at the time, like, I don't know, I feel like you just kind of go into autopilot and like
Okay.
all these people are in your home but then at the same time, like they're there taking care of their kids. You're just kind of in and around.
And you're helping them see the rhythms and how a healthy
Yeah.
family operates and looks.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard to expect parents who have never seen or people who've never seen a healthy model of a family and what it looks like to throw them in there and say, hey, go take some classes and now you got it figured out.
Yeah.
And
Right,
so
right.
what we've seen is that it really does change the trajectory. It does change the mindset. It does change the outcomes when you get to bring those families in and let them see a little bit of your home and I mean, you want to be protective, but at the same time, you want to share what God's given you and share with the experience that He's given you and let it bless somebody. I mean, some of the things we walk through that are the hardest things in our lives may not even be for us. They may be so that we can walk through something else with somebody.
Wow.
And that's a very, very hard thing to walk through.
Yeah.
But it's some of the deepest truth that I've come up with as I
sure.
walk through this foster care journey.
Wow. Earlier, you talked about something that when I look at y'all's story, that has probably had the most profound impact on me, and it was this idea that everybody that claims Jesus as their Lord has a role to play in this type of ministry, because it's just ministry, and that there's some way that you can help or impact. What has that looked like for you guys to help get other people involved in foster care? Not even just at BattleCreek, but in Tulsa, in Oklahoma. How
Well, for me, I guess one of the things is, I'm constantly asked, how can I help you? What can I do for you? And I used to just say, nothing, I'm good, because I didn't want to ask for help or feel like a burden to someone else. But then over the years, realized that I'm robbing them of maybe what God's asking them to do.
yeah.
So then I just started saying, well, you can bring dinner because as a mom, doesn't matter how many kids you have, but if that one thing is taken off of your plate for the day, it's like day made, and people like to do it. And nowadays it's so easy, they can DoorDash it or whatever. They don't even have to leave their house.
Yeah.
So just allowing people to bring a meal or bring you diapers, or we would create, when we'd get a child that we hadn't had either that age or that clothing size or whatever before, then we would create an Amazon list and just share it on Facebook. And within a day, like it's empty,
Yeah.
and people are like, oh, I can do that. I can shop.
Yeah.
So that's one of the easiest ways.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I feel like for me, again, like just sharing part of mine and Karis's foster care journey, it was a lot of lessons learned from y'all. And that was, we reached out to you guys when we, had finished our training and everything and opened our home fully. And we're like, well, what do we do next? And the Amazon list was something that you had told Karis. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like that feels really weird to me.
Yeah, it does.
Create a registry essentially. Like we don't know what age kid we're going to get. We don't know what gender of kid we're going to get. Like we have no idea. And we're just asking people to buy stuff. And she was like, no, this is how people get involved. Because she had grown up in it. She knew that people wanted to do that. And for me, it just felt so funny to ask. But that's a huge part of letting people be involved. It's just extending that invitation, right? If you never invite people in, they're not ever going to be able to get involved.
Right.
And people want to in some way, right?
I think one of the other ways that we've seen prove beneficial for seeing long-term understanding of foster care and adoption is respite. And that process has become so much easier because now you don't have to go through all of the training and all of the prerequisites and all of the legal stuff that is required by DHS. But now they've just allowed foster parents to take that ownership into their own hands. And if you would trust your own child with that family or that person or that whoever, then you can trust trust a child in state custody with that same responsibility. And so that's opened up the doors to be able to say, hey, if you want a firsthand glance at what foster care looks like, come watch this baby for 3 hours, or come hold this baby for 2 hours and take him with you, and take him on your errands and do whatever you do with your life, just like you normally would with your family. And so that, I think, has been a huge eye opener for lots of people, that, hey, I can get my feet wet and just stay in the shallow end and just kick around and mess around, but still see some of the inner workings and some of the fruit and some of the struggle even. Yeah.
And a lot of them that we've asked to watch your kids are now foster parents.
Yeah. I was about to say, there's been a time or two that I've, been at y'all's house and I've seen someone holding a baby and I'm like, they're going to be fostering soon.
There it goes.
It's going to happen.
Yep.
So maybe this is the last thing we can talk about here, and maybe on a tougher note, but 48 kids in 14 years. You don't have 48 kids in your house right now, right?
No.
And so you've had to say goodbye in a lot of different ways to different kids over the past decade and a half. How do you manage that?
I feel like it's day to day.
Yeah. I think we had to go back to our very first placement when Miranda got Aaliyah, was her name.
Yeah.
From the Lower Desert shelter, and she brought her home, and we kept her. We had her for
3 weeks.
3 weeks, something like that. And we really felt like this is our thing. This is our adoption. Like, God answered our prayer in the first time. It took 1 year for us to get a placement, but now we got a placement, and it's over. We got it. It's done. Look at God.
Yep.
And God reminded us that it's not our show, and it's not our story. And He found a family member related to that baby, and she's with him today. Yeah. And so that broke us. It really did. Somebody so fresh into that, thinking you're coming in there with this savior mentality, like, I'm doing the Lord's work and we did it. And then God says, it's not the plan. It's not the plan. And so we took 6 months off of foster care once she went home, and we had to heal. And then we got a phone call, and they said, we got a little girl named Brooklyn, and that meant something to us. Yeah. And so we said yes, and God changed our lives through it. And she is now 12, she's going to be 12. And it just continues to prove that even through the heartache, even through the trouble, even through some of the long, hard conversations we've had with her biological mother, still, she doesn't not have a biological mother. She still has a biological mother. Right. Has still continued to prove to us that God's faithful, and that those hard times will come. They're going to come. Those pits and those valleys are present. But those are the moments where God says He's actually with us. Yeah. In those valleys, and that you'll hear a still small voice saying, go this way or go that way. And so I think I can stand on that and say we made it through that. And so it gets a little bit easier every time. Yeah. Yeah, you've seen the goodness of God right through all of that. And every time you're like, oh, okay, God's good. Yeah.
And I think partly one thing I would add to it is that we went into this with an adoption mindset, and it took years to change that. I'm always hearing with foster care that reunification is the goal. Yeah. And every time I would hear that, I was so angry because they deserved better. Yeah,
because reunification, by that you mean taking a foster child back with the bio parent that messed up in some way, and that's why they were removed.
But that's always the goal.
That's
always the goal. And through that, like over the years, we've had 48 kids, but we've only adopted 4. And so reunification is the goal always. And even
that's
though
a high percentage of reunifications.
Exactly. And so walking into this with an adoption mindset was completely incorrect. And that's what I would tell anyone else. If you're interested in foster care, then adoption is not the goal. And so just realizing that it is your job to do everything you can to support reunification. Absolutely. And when you can wrap your brain around that, it makes the letting go a lot easier.
Wow. Yeah.
And I think we can also stand on on some scenarios and situations where we still have relationship with the child who was in our care for 2 to 3 years, and now they're back with their biological families, and we've got to go to CC's Pizza with that entire family and bring our entire family and just watch God show up and watch that mother come to a place of realization where she's no longer mad at us because we're part of the problem, but now we're actually part of the solution. And there's gratefulness.
Man, that's amazing. I think that for a lot of people listening to this, there is this fear when you foster that you're going to be doing this alone, right? Like, if you want to be a missionary, you get to go out on the field, and then you come and do your work during the day, and then you come back to your home. That's your sanctuary. That's your safe place. When you're a foster parent, the home is where the work is. That's where you're, showing the gospel to these kids and bio families. And that can be really, really tough, and you need people to make that work, right? How, if I'm part of a community, maybe a different church, how do I get people involved? How do I get them to care about my foster experience? And, how do I find that community?
That's a good question.
I would say, first of all, there's so many Facebook groups.
Yeah. You run one of them, right?
Yes,
one of the big ones.
I do. And so there's so many of them. But through that, it seems, very simple, but through that, everyone's on Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's very, very simple, non-invasive. You're not showing up at people's house or, a group somewhere. But you learn, like, you can ask questions, you can ask for support. You learn that there's people in your area that you can talk to. You can do play dates, all the things. And then also there's in-person groups. And so for me, those are huge because I don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so the Facebook groups are huge. But then, the in-person groups are great. I go to one like once a month, just adoptive moms. And so you can kind of talk through things. But I would say that's probably where I would start.
Yeah.
Or a community group with people who are foster parents.
I think my mind goes to some things like that, like Legacy Family Network, which is some of what you're talking about, which is a great nonprofit parachurch organization that wants to come alongside, prepare backpacks for kids who are going to come into foster care, to hand them something instead of handing them a plastic bag. I think that there's the 111 Project, who was started by a guy who was on staff with me at BattleCreek at one point, and still, I believe, attends BattleCreek. So. It's just getting active. Honestly, it's just doing something.
Yeah.
We're the biggest fans of the latest book we read, and we're the biggest fans of the last show you watched. And if you found some amazing product on Amazon, you want somebody to know about it, you're going to tell people about it. And so when this becomes passionate about something that you love, when you start seeing God work in it, and you start seeing how you grow, but then also watching kids grow and change and form their identities, and you get to be responsible for that. I think that people are attracted to passion. Yeah. And so when you get passionate about something, there's not very many people who will hold back to come alongside or to at least want to figure out why or what or how is that like that or is it really like that? And so those are the couple things I think that helped us wrap our minds around. What does a support group look like? What does family look like? What does extended family look like? What does respite look like? And all of those in-betweens.
I love that. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your experiences and your story with foster care. Man, y'all are great. Thanks so much for tuning in to Beyond BattleCreek. If you liked what you heard today, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share so that we can continue to do projects like this. Thanks so much. See you next time.